All right, go for it.
Good evening. This is our meeting for the Stayton Budget Committee. It's 6 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. A few folks out, but we're hoping they'll jump on here in just a minute. Alyssa, you want to go ahead and do roll call for us?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Luke Cranston, he has not joined us yet this evening. Connie Dominguez.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Counselor. So she just popped on.
I'm here.
Okay, yeah, I thought so. Alan Kingsley has not joined us yet this evening. Ralph Lewis.
Here.
Counselor McDonald.
Yes, here.
Julia McFerrin.
Here.
Counselor Mullen.
Here.
And Counselor Ort has not joined us yet this evening. Counselor Patty.
Here.
Mayor Porter.
Here.
And Brent Walker.
Here.
Okay, and I'll just go through staff that is on the call also. Myself, Alyssa, Angelo, Keith Campbell, City Manager is here, Dan Fleischman, Director of Planning and Development, Chief David Friesendahl, Lance Ludwig, Public Works Director, Jana Moser, Library Director, and of course Susanna Sabraja, our Finance Director.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for doing that for us, Alyssa.
Sure.
Next item of business for everybody is the approval of the minutes from the May 17th, 2021 State and Budget Committee meeting. So I'll entertain a motion for that now.
So moved.
Okay. Got a motion from committee member Ralph Lewis and a second from, I believe that was Tony Walker. Do I have that right? Brent Walker. Yeah, your name says Tony there. Sorry about that. Anyhow, got it. So we got a motion and a second. Alyssa, you want to go ahead and pull the council or committee on that, please?
Sure. Connie.
Yes.
Counselor Hook.
Yes.
Ralph.
Yes.
Counselor McDonald.
Yes.
Julia.
Yes.
Counselor Mullen.
Yes.
Counselor Patty.
Yes.
Mayor Porter.
Yes.
And Brent.
Yes.
All right, motion passes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8-0.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, everybody.
And
next, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to let you know, it looks like Alan and Counselor Ort are going to be joining us right now, so but we can move on. Just wanted to let you know.
Well, welcome, Alan and Counselor Ort. I appreciate you guys. Anyhow, the next thing on the agenda is going to be the public hearing. And with that, there is an opening statement to be read, so please bear with me. So Oregon Revised Statutes 221.770 requires 2 public hearings to be held to hear from citizens regarding the use of state revenue sharing funds distributed to the city of Stayton. The purpose of this hearing is to hear public testimony on the proposed uses of the funds. Before opening the public hearing, we will all receive a staff report. Susanna, you're on mute.
Okay, Alyssa's sharing the screen. Better get that up. Voila. Okay, so for the state revenue sharing, it is in the general fund, and this slide here kind of lets you see that it's 0.27% of the revenue that's coming in for these state taxes that we receive for the cigarette tax, the liquor tax, and the gas tax. It will be used within the general fund for it goes into the general fund, and it is used for the needs of the general fund to support all the different departments that we have there for police, admin, court, council, and planning, and missing one. My brain froze. That's really nice. Welcome back. the courts. And so that's where this revenue is used. And that's the breakdown. And that's my staff report.
All right. So the next thing we have is to go ahead and open our public hearing. So I'll now go ahead and open the public hearing. Did city staff receive any written testimony or requests to provide verbal testimony regarding the proposed uses of state revenue sharing?
Counselor Patty, this is Alyssa. We did not receive any requests for public comment.
Okay. Sounds like we have no reason to continue this public hearing then. So there being no further public testimony, I will close the public hearing. We'll go ahead and move on to the budget overview from, again, Susanna Sabraja. Thank you so much.
Okay. So this is a real unique budget this year because we've made comments many times in the past as we wrote budgets that we get these budgets approved and they're basically outdated no longer after we printed the ink. This is a very unique year because this year we're going to be approving a budget that's already outdated because of the levies passing. So as we go through the budget and we work through all this, just keep in mind that parks, pool, library, and the general fund will be coming back to you after all of this is approved so that our FY22 budget can be approved so we can have the spending authority that we need effective July 1st to move forward with operations while we prepare the new budget and be bringing it back to the budget committee and council because it's a supplemental budget and it'll have to go through all the timing and the processes that we're currently doing now to approve the updated budget. So just wanted to have that in your mind as we're walking through all these funds. So any questions on that so far? Okay, next slide. So this is how we broke down our talking points for this evening and the next couple nights. We're going to start with some basic budgets. I'm going to walk through some things there and talk about it. We're going to look at the overall effects of COVID and the pandemic on the budget and the constraints that we're dealing with as we wrote this budget that you're about to approve or to the next couple of days. We're going to talk about the council goals and which ones we were able to put into this budget because of budget constraints. Then all of the departments will come through and we'll share the actual budget for each department. And then I'll come back again and wrap it up with the 5-year forecast and what that looks like as we come together. Okay, first slide. Now, when we met not too long ago, this slide was in my presentation from before, and we talked about during lean budgets and during budgets in general, how we make our decisions starting with essential services and work our way to amenities. And we talked about the different types of things that are in each one of these categories under essential service, specialty, and amenities. And we all understand what that means, and we all understand what that looks like when we're making our budget decision, when the staff's making their decisions. But there's many more layers to this budget than this piece. So the next slide, Alyssa, please. In your budget book, in the beginning there, and with the budget basic topics from pages 15 to 21, talks about this breakdown. And then there's more in there from that we're going to kind of walk through. But this is the first breakdown that you see when our funds are divided up by budgetary types of categories. These categories are required, and they're also in our audits, and our auditors go through a whole process when they're comparing the rules and the requirements as they're putting this together. So you see these topics in other places besides the budget, but we start there, and this is our basic breakdown. And so when you're thinking about the governmental funds, you're talking about funds like the general fund, our specialty revenues, for example, one of those would be the street fund or the library fund. And then of course, inter-services where the funds are supporting other departments, for example, public works admin. And our enterprise funds are our business funds, which is our utilities, our water, sewer, and our fiduciary funds are other specialty funds that we have. So that's kind of the big picture breakdown. But when you take it from that level to the next level, if you want to go to the next slide, we have a whole bunch of layer of onions. In the bottom of my slides, I put references to what we're talking about. So we talked about the first slide and the auditor's breakdown and how that applies and how we have to follow those groupings. But then the other important piece is that these funds come restricted and unrestricted, and there's rules according to GAAP accounting rules. And just to give you a visual, my GAAP accounting book is not exactly small, and there's a oodle of financial rules in here, requirements on how we can do the things that we do with the funds, how we report them, how we categorize them, our internal control, all of these things are part of this. And so when we talk about these revenues that are coming into us, they come in two buckets. They're either restricted, meaning those are specialty rules that we only can use those funds for, or they're unrestricted and we can do as needed to do. And so keeping that in mind, when we go to the next slide, you can see that our funds are broken down. Our general fund is truly our only unrestricted fund. And then all of the other ones under the list you see are restricted funds, which means that the revenue that we're given and the rules according to the fund are restricted to what we can do. So that means when the revenue that comes in for the street fund can only be used on street fund projects. And that is very clear. And the library money, the levy money that comes in for the library can only be used for the library, and so on the list goes. And the other revenue funds, those are just specialty funds that we have set up, and they have their rules based on how we set them up. And of course, public work admin, as we talked about, is in a support fund to support all of the other public work funds. Any questions on this breakdown from here? Okay, so understanding that those rules, the next part that's inside your budget basics section is our fund definitions. Our definitions are driven by the state of Oregon and our local budget law manual that we follow. And our definitions are in your book. And our definitions also pretty much talk about what we're allowed to do in those funds. They kind of are similar so that it's easy to follow. These are some wordages that I put in here that are from the budget actual manual. We wrote them in our budget book to try to keep it easy to understand the flow. But your specialty revenues are monies that come with special money, special grants, or your tax levies that are dictated by those funding sources, the same as capital projects can only be done for capital projects. And when the monies that we receive from that have to only go to those things. A lot of those capital projects are driven by the STC funds that we collect. Then the next slide. And our enterprise funds, which is our utility funds, our water, sewer, stormwater, those are driven, and those are funds that we collect the fees, and we use those fees to pay current and pay for future expenditures that we know will be for operating the funds. And then the inter-service funds, of course, is support fund. So there's your stages. You have the major breakout categories of how the budget works. You have the restricted and the unrestricted and how the funds are driven out by that. And then our definitions. So we have a combination of state rules, Oregon Department of Revenue rules, GAAP accounting rules, the principal accounting rules for auditors. All of those things drive how these buckets all work. So any questions on any of that? Okay, great. All right, next slide. So in writing our budget this year, we've had many things happening. With our current fiscal year, as we talked about earlier when we met before, we budget all our revenues lower. To anticipate some sort of hit from the COVID-19 pandemic. Then we also froze capital projects, tightened down on what we were spending because we really didn't know how far the slope was going to slide down. And that was to our advantage because of the ice storm and the fires that we went through, gave us a really good position to be able to be prepared for this fiscal year. But this fiscal year, we are still in the pandemic. We're not really sure how long it's going to last. We don't know the full effects of what's going to come. So in being conservative and proactive, we decided that the best thing to do was to take whatever our estimated revenues would end out this fiscal year, show zero growth, so that we can have a tight budget so that we were prepared for whatever's coming for the pandemic. The other big piece that we're facing this fiscal year is our CPI rate seems to have a mind of its own. And that could really cause some issues for the cost of the materials and services that we did plan in our budget. Because when I looked at the budget, when I looked at the CPI rate at the beginning of January, it was 1.4%. And from that time frame, which would have been right at the end of December, to the March when we looked at it for the end of March, it jumped a whole percent. And now this budget is based on 2.4%. That is a huge growth in a very short time. And if we continue to see this, we may have some issues when we're looking at our projects and our services. So to be proactive, we kept those revenues low. We kept our expenditures a little bit high, anticipation of this. And we are also going to be quarterly monitoring this as we did this current fiscal year, so that we can plan accordingly as we watch how the economics unfold this year. Any questions on the assumptions that we're working with as we wrote our budgets?
Can you remind me what CPI stands for?
That's the Consumer Price Index. It is, we get that from the from that website. The federal government puts it together and kind of gives us an idea of what we think the inflation rate will look like and what its growth and changed. So they're saying right now that we've seen an increase in pricing to up to 2.4% from what it was just a few months ago. And we use that as a guide to kind of decide what our expenses might look like. Because like right now, if I pay $2, it's going to be 2.4% higher when I buy it today, if I would have bought it in January. And so that's the guide we're using when we're writing this. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Susanna, how often is that CPI updated for our purposes?
We look at it right now. We pull it up the first part of April and use them as of March's numbers. And those are the numbers we use for all the budgets. And we use in the 5-year forecast.
Okay. Is there any possibility or need or whatever to look at end of May's numbers and see what that is?
For the budget purposes and the time involved to build the budget, no. The
Okay.
quarterly updates that we'll be doing going forward, we'll be monitoring and looking at, not to come back to you as a budget issue, but to look at where our expenditures are. So we will be monitoring it, but we don't use those numbers more than saying, okay, we probably need to come back and change some of our spending authority because it might be higher than we originally anticipated. Does that make sense? So we use that 2.4 to write our budget and all our budget assumptions and all our 5-year plans, but we will be monitoring what the CPI rate is really doing every quarter and compare it to where we're at with where we're spending on our projects.
Susanna, we all have a suspicion that CPI is going up by leaps and bounds.
Correct.
But we can't base this budget on that, can we?
No, we
Okay.
can't.
Okay.
Because we have set the parameters and even in the prior years, we've always used Mart's report to determine our increases for our utility rates and those things. And for our COLAs. So we always use the same snapshot of time.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for Susanna? Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So as the challenges that I just talked about, when we put this budget together, we focused on all the council goals that we were already actively involved in and needing to wrap up this fiscal year. So these are the ones that we're focused on. And part of that is, of course, the pandemic. And also because we didn't fill a lot of positions, so we're limited on staffing on some of the things that needed to be done. So as we walk through these next few slides, just keep that in mind that these are projects that we started in this fiscal year or prior year. Actually, most of them are all prior year that we were unable to finish this current year are still needing to finish up. Okay. So the first one is our economic development strategies. We started that one. We've come a long way. And the rest of this fiscal year, we got $150,000 that we need to finish wrapping up this project. for our urban renewals. Next slide. The facility study that we started in the 1920 budget, we could not complete because of COVID-19 and the last pieces we have. We're still unable to do them this fiscal year. So our budget is planning to finish that study in this current fiscal year. And we have 50,000 left of work to do to complete that facilities assessment of our buildings citywide. So we can report on that. Next slide. The emergency management is in the budget. Last year we used it, thank goodness, and we have it in again this year. When we wrote the letter, the management letter in the beginning, we originally thought we were going to get some additional state funding. So we thought that extra funding was going to help with some other emergency management projects. That's why it had $100,000. But inside the budget right now, it's bouncing around. I'm still on emergency management. Okay, there we go. Right now, the budget we found from the ice storms and all the power outages that our backup generator for all of our IT and the police department is in dire needs of updating. So we're going to be changing that out and getting a new one. And during the ice storm, we found that our electrical pole out there is definitely not stable. So we're going to be replacing those two things. And then we're going to continue to, as we learn from all we've been through, and we'll be looking at future projects after the assessments of these natural disasters we've been through for what our next emergency management goals will be.
Susanna, this is Keith. Can I interrupt really quick here?
Yep, go for it.
So in the ever-changing world of potential money, there is an opportunity again that we think there's a possibility this 100,000 may be back on the table again. So we were hoping to get word again tonight. This is just the joy of writing a budget in a dynamic world. So we're looking to see for official confirmation, but this may be a possibility coming back on. So I just want everyone to know. But until we see it from the state, we'll just continue to have it as a possibility and an understanding. So I just wanted to hop on to make sure everyone knew that.
This is how fast it's changed. I didn't even get a chance to know that yet. Any questions on these goals so far?
I have one real quick. Some of these figures that we're assuming, like the 50,000 for, I believe, the facility study, and this 100,000, is there any chance that some of these amounts could change due to the CPI fluctuation that was previously mentioned, or is this set in stone?
For the facility study, the bid was already set, and this is literally what we haven't paid them yet for what they have left to do, so that's not going to change.
Okay.
The cost of the generator and things could change. Depending on what happens, that could be affected by it and the timing of when we get that project done. The revenue that Keith was just talking about, I think it's still a flat 100,000. So that if we get it, then that gives us the flexibility.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? And please make sure I'll try to remember to stop and pause, but please ask all the questions you need. Next slide. The other one is completing the update of the sewer water parks master plan. That one we will be completing this fiscal year, and we're estimated about $225,000 to spend for that. Next slide. The secondary water source, we started that project in 2019. We have about another 80,000 to complete that project this fiscal year. Okay, any questions on the council goals at this point? Okay, or any other questions you may have thought of? You know how that works, right? You get through the little slide, you're like, oh, I should have asked. So I have no problem going back if you think of a question. So, okay, no questions. So this is the big picture. This is taking the whole city as a whole. This is just a great big numbers. So the full city budget is $26 million budget. And when we look at that, our beginning part of that 26 million is our beginning fund balance is 12.5 million as we start the next fiscal year. We're estimating to be ending that ending fund balance at 11 million. And we have 15 million in expenditures, but the net of that is 12.4 million because we have 2.7 million of those expenditures are in our transfers. Okay, next slide. So if we take this again, I'm still talking whole citywide. I'm taking all this stuff and bringing it together in one big pile. All the charge for services from all the funds is about 54% of our budget. All of our taxes from all our funds is about 22%, and then intergovernmental at 14% and miscellaneous at 10%. To overall revenue without transfers at $10.9 million of revenue that will be coming in. Actually coming in. Any questions on that part? Okay. Now, charge for service looks like a really big number, but when we break it down by fund, you can see that the majority of our charge for services is really coming from those enterprise funds, from our storm, sewer, water, and streets. Those are highlighted in green. Those bring you to the 5.5 million for those enterprise funds, where you can see the general fund and the library have very, very little revenue coming in. And of course, SDCs, and we've had conversations in the past how SDCs kind of tweak those percentages as well. So this kind of gives you a little deeper look to know what funds this revenue is really going to, even though it looks like a big part of it. One thing to keep in mind as we're building this budget as well is that when we're talking about charge for services and we're talking about taxes, that's why we watch the economy so close, because what's going on out there really can affect what we can receive based on those things. And that's why we really pay close to those assumptions, and we talk a lot about those as the foundations of as we're building our budgets. Any questions on this part? Okay, next slide. So the property taxes, our permanent rate stays the same, and that's the 3.3280. That stays. As we said earlier, because of the pandemic, we took what we think we're going to estimate at the end of this year, but no growth in there, even though we do know there's an increase and a change in our values. But we're looking at collection rate when we're talking about how we build the budget. And because of uncertainties, we were safer to zero it out from what we got this year to the next year, because we don't know the effects of our collection rate at this point. This current fiscal year, we saw a decrease, and then we also saw a small little, usually we don't get much after December, but then we saw this little tiny bubble pop up. So timing of when it'll come in and those things are critical. So that's why we zeroed that out. And we did that for all of the other major revenue sources and even some of the smaller ones like permits and things like that. Whatever we thought was this year, we just zeroed it out for next year. Any questions? Okay. Next slide. Alyssa made this amazing dollar to break down what our taxes look like. And you will see this dollar, it's new in our budget this year, and it really gives a great visual. Now, we built this budget without any levy money again. So this is what our dollar would look like if we had zero levy coming in. So when the person pays their $1 of their property taxes, you can see that Stayton gets 23 cents of that dollar, and then the Marion County and the state and Temecula and the fire district, they all get a share of that. So when we're looking at our 2 point whatever million that our property taxes are, that's 23 cents off of that dollar. So this is a really nice visual to kind of see that breakdown. But we also have another one for the next slide, because we did get the levies passed for the recreation levy and the library levy. And you can see by adding these two levies that 0.026 cents of your dollar goes to that library, and then 0.033 to the recreation levy. And you can see that everyone's numbers kind of shifted a little tiny bit, and the city of Stayton went down to 2.17 from 2.3. So that's just kind of a really nice visual on how that looks. And hopefully that kind of helps. Next slide. We did do the increase. So we do have the 2.4 CPI increase to the sewer, storm, and street utility fees. And we also have the same for water plus the 5%, which is what we've been doing. So those increases are there. Because we're still unsure of what collection rates will look like, we still left it at estimated how we're going to end this year with zero growth for the revenue going forward. The nice thing about this is we monitor every quarter. If anything changes, we can bring the budget back, which you already know we're going to on some of the funds. And then for SDC funds, we're still using the 1.6% estimated for the ERN, which is the engineering. I wrote it down and now I'm going to forget. But it's the engineering's basically CPI rate for construction. And that is different than the CPI rate for all expenditures.
Susanna?
Yes,
Susanna,
Lance.
this is Lance, real quick, and
Go
I'll
for
let you
it.
go. That's engineering news record. That's what the resolution says we need to use annually from June or July 1 through June 30. And that will actually climb. But until we get to June 1, I didn't want to estimate. So that's what that is. It's engineering news record.
Thanks, Lance. I thought I put it on my slide notes, but I didn't. Thank you. Okay. Next slide. So now we're looking at the expenditures for the city as a whole. You can see that the personnel is 37% and materials and services at 39%. Keep in mind that this budget, normally in the years past and last year, personnel is usually a couple percent higher than materials and services, but this budget was built with no levy. So there's a decrease in staffing because of the decrease in the pool and the library. And when we bring the budget back to you, that 37% will probably pop back up to its normal couple percent higher than materials and services. But this kind of lets you kind of see 10% of our expenses are going out to debt services, 14% is going to our capital projects. And that's out of the 12.2 million that we're going to be spending on expenditures. And that does not look at transfers. That's just the cost of the things we put in the budget. Any questions on any of this so far? Okay, next slide. So this is kind of giving you the same thing I just said a second ago. This budget has 46.3 full equivalent FTE staff in there. The reduction is the pool and the library. The vacant positions that we have not filled this year are in this budget to be filled this coming fiscal year. And so all of those are there. So that's really the only difference that you're looking at is those two. Next slide. There's been no changes in our debt services. We still only have the debts through the water, stormwater, and then the interfund loan that was between the general fund and stormwater. There's no additional debt, so there's no change there from prior years. Next slide. This is our capital projects compared to this year from last year. Last year we had $2.2 million. This year we have 1.7, and you can see that the each fund, what those amounts are, and as each department comes and speaks, they will give you more detail on their capital projects. For the admin one, for ours, that one is the emergency management piece that we're working on. But this kind of lets you see fund by fund how much is going to be spent in each capital project. It's a big picture view at this point. Any questions on any of that so far on the funding rules, restricted, unrestricted, any of the big pictures? Because the next slide is going to go into speaking specifically on the general fund. Okay, so in the general fund, we shall begin. Next slide. Oh, whoops, one more. Okay, so I wanted to kind of bring this down into a little closer picture of the general fund revenues. So you can see that that our taxes are 2.2 million are be coming in. That's and then the charge for services at 90,000. We talked a little bit before. Our franchise fees is the 704. The intergovernmental funds are 740,000. And then the miscellaneous is a combination of court fines, fees, permits, interest, rents, things like that, which is 186. It's kind of combined together. Our franchise fees are down a little bit for the power because of the decreases that we talked about before. And again, I did the same thing we talked about a little bit before. I looked at what we thought we're going to end at this year for these revenues and just flatline them across. But there's kind of the big picture without transfers, the revenue coming into the general fund specifically is the 3.9 million. Any questions on that? Okay, next slide. So when we look at the expenditures of the general fund, this is how it breaks out per department. Out of all the expenditures for the general fund as a whole combined is 4.2 million. 52% of that budget goes to the police department. The miscellaneous 11% is your planning, your community center, your court and your street lights, those are very small, so they're together. Council and admin are combined at 25%, and the non-departmental, that is the 12%. That one is our HUD grant that we were just awarded for 500,000, and of course the transfers that we send to the other to library parks. That will change, of course, when we write the new budget, but that's the percentage breakdown of all the funds within the general fund. Next slide is now the police department, unless you have any other questions on the general fund.
Does anyone have questions for Susanna? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
You're still muted, unfortunately.
Can you guys hear us?
Oh, there we go. Thank you, guys.
All right, I'm hitting the wrong thing or just bad luck. That's not how you're supposed to start this, though. Good evening, Mayor, councilors, and committee members. Some of you have seen me before, some of you haven't. I'm Dave Friesendahl, the Chief of Police. In regards to our budget, if I can get our slides to work now. There we go. So some of our priorities for our community, as you can see here, was last year we began the accreditation process, which really is the best practices in law enforcement. It's actually a very small group in the state of Oregon currently that are accredited. If you've been following legislative changes in law enforcement, they actually are asking larger agencies to do this just because of the cost and the time that it takes to actually become accredited. We're still moving forward with that, even though we're not in that larger group. We're going to continue to strive forward for that for our community as well as our agency. Provide high quality of service, reduce crime, increase quality of life for everybody in the community. I think that's just a core value that we have. Building better partnerships with our law enforcement agencies. That's one thing that we're trying to do, is continue to work with our surrounding agencies to improve our professional capacity and our abilities to serve the community. It's nice to be able to phone a friend when you need one. We've had a couple of those calls this year. I think with all the major events, having those relationships are truly important. The focus on effective use of data and technology, I had that last year. There has been some little problems with that, with us going over the new RMS system, Mark 43, but we're getting to the point where we're actually figuring it all out with CopLink and some other systems that actually dump together. And I know we have several people that are very technically savvy and understand that sometimes the data doesn't actually get pulled over exactly right every time. So they've been working on it, and hopefully we'll be able to be producing some new reports for council in the future. One of my core and one of my goals was to strengthen the community relationships that you have through events and various programs. As we get into the next slide and stuff, I'll be tying together what we did actually through COVID, through wildfires, through ice storms, through our tanker spill, all these things that actually let us actually work with people within the community outside of just the city itself. How we enhance some traffic safety during this time and build the overall goals of responsive organization and structure so we can be responsive to the community and whatever happens. I would say I'm very proud of our staff this last year with everything that we faced. I think we did a very, very good job. Any questions about those at all on priorities?
Oh, Chief, this is Hank Porter. Hey, explain that accreditation process a little bit, please. Best practices in law enforcement.
So
that's not that's beyond the academy for our young officers.
It's actually for the whole agency. It's actually best practices in regards to our policies and our procedures for the city. It actually goes with CALIA, which is a national-based certification, and there's an actual group in Oregon that's the Oregon Accreditation Alliance. They call it Oregon. The funny part is Alaska's part of it too. But what it is it's the best practices. So what we have to do is go through our policy manual and our procedures, compare it to the standards, the best standards, and not just compare it and write our policies to it, but then we have to show proofs. And that's where the work comes in. That's actually us going through and looking at our reports, looking at our report, I would say, is like the annual report that I provided to the city manager based on all the different matrices and events that were happening with the police department, to a facilities report, to a use of force report, all these things that we can actually produce reports that actually hit the marks for OAA. A lot of that too is how we process evidence. How we actually take care of our evidence in regards to auditing. So it's really rich and real thick on what the best practices are. The other thing is it's always a moving target. Accreditation will change with legislative changes. As we're having legislative changes now, some of those requirements will change within those standards to become best practices. So once we have it, then the problem, or not the problem, but the work is we have to keep together for 3 years. We have to keep all of our records and all of our proofs along with our changes to keep up with that accreditation best practices to stay accredited. Hopefully that helped.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do on our next slide here, if I don't mess this up, is just sort of our accomplishments in this last year. So, and these are going to tie back to our main goals. So one of the first things is we supported state and stability right at the beginning of the pandemic by checking in with people who were locked down, couldn't get medications, couldn't get out. And what we did is we set up a program with the San Diego integration team where we were actually going out and going to pharmacies and actually delivering pharmaceuticals that we could to those people where they couldn't get it, to make sure that they were healthy. Plus that gave us a chance to check in with them and make sure they were doing okay. That goes back to our goal of just providing high quality of service and strengthening our relationship with everybody. The next one, the Beachy Creek fire, we all sort of lived through that one. With the plan we did for a citywide evacuation, we also supported the Marion County Sheriff's Office. Our staff went up and actually worked canyon patrols to make sure that the looters weren't victimizing people a second time. Wildfire got them the first time, and then people were trying to come through and steal what they had. So we support them that way. We also, it was me, I actually went to the command post at Chemeketa and actually assisted with the PIOs in putting out information that was timely and relevant for fire victims and just updates along with fire, and was able to create a good line of communication back to administration here at the City Hall. They were able to push out really quick and relative information onto our Facebook and our page, which I think during that event were actually really on top of things and very quick, and a lot of people relied on it. And that was us partnering with our law enforcement agencies, being able to have that relationship and trust where I can walk in and say, where do you want me, where can I go, I'm here to help. And then on top of it, having a team that could actually take care of things here and relay back to me what was happening here and be able to move swiftly and quickly. So we were real happy with that. Part of that is the next one, which was we hired Captain Gwen Johns. I think you guys have met her once on council. Hopefully, since things are starting to maybe get back to normal, we get to meet her again. She's a great captain. We hired her, brought her on. The one thing about that hiring that we did that was sort of different is we actually reached out trying to create more collaboration with other organizations that we work with closely as a police department. We actually had members from the North San Diego School District and the Chamber of Commerce on our oral board. It wasn't just me sitting in a room with the candidates and trying to pick the best person. It was actually a group effort from various people throughout the community, as well as our supervisors and the Stayton Police Officers Association was also present for that selection process.
Chief, were you, this is Hank again, were you surprised that you got assistance from NSSD?
No, sir, not at all. Actually, after I first started here, that was one of the things that I was doing, was working really closely with the schools and the principals here, and it's just a good relationship. So it was just an easy thing to do. It was an easy ask. They have then turned around and actually asked Captain Johns to speak at the high school for all the ladies that, on our sports teams about leadership. It didn't quite happen, but the offer was there, and I think with the COVID, it just didn't quite gel right. But hopefully we'll be able to do that kind of thing in the future. So it's just a good working relationship.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You betcha. The next one is that Sergeant Meeks actually put in with the Doris J. Whipper Fund Foundation for AEDs. This is just us trying to use the funds that are out there, grants that we can, to actually extend our budget so we can actually be more effective. We actually we currently have brand new AEDs in every patrol car. So it makes us just more versatile. A lot of times we're out on patrol trying to get a ambulance to a location. Sometimes we can be there a little bit quicker. We could be right around the corner. Last year we partnered with the county and the state, and we have naloxone too for the opioid overdoses too. So we can actually respond, which actually made us, again, better for the community as a whole. So all of these goals that we have here that you're seeing are tying into the main body of work that we're doing. The old AEDs didn't get tossed away. They're actually being deployed throughout the city right now, just because of COVID. We wanted to have some new batteries and pads put into those older units to make sure they were all good to deploy everywhere, and all that's on back order. So hopefully it'll come in sooner or later, and we'll be able to deploy all those throughout the community. So again, partnerships with different agencies. One of the things that we did this last year in 2020 was we were fully staffed all the way through December. That gave us the opportunity to actually select basically a hybrid detective program, where when we are fully staffed, we have the ability to put an officer that's on lap shift that can actually do investigations, a little higher end investigations, that takes anybody who's been in law enforcement a lot more training. There's just a lot of different nuances to becoming a detective. Because of that relationship with Marion County, Detective Butler is actually deployed currently out with Marion County and getting lots of experience, coming out with great ideas and different thoughts on how we can improve as an agency, and he's getting his training. Without having that relationship, we wouldn't be able to do that. They've been happy. He's been out on several of the large incidents in Marion County in the last month. If you read the paper, you'll probably see quite a few of those. The other one we have here is Lexipol. Lexipol is our policy manual provider. In our budget, that falls under our contract services. They go through and they look at actually providing the best policies possible under state law. They also give us what we call DTBs, which are daily training bulletins. So we send out 30 of those a month or so, depending on the month, 28 or 30 or 31. The officers go through that and they actually get tested on policy and procedures. So, which is a great way for them to refresh and make sure that they're current. We actually were given their gold award this last year because we were at 80% or greater on all the issuances of policy and DTBs. We were actually in the 90 percentile, so we were well above what they are for the gold. This helps us with the accreditation process because if we're doing best practices already, sometimes aligning those things are a lot easier for us. So it really helps us as we move forward. One thing we did with the budget last year too was for under our building services was enhanced our security of the department. The front lobby, when I arrived back 2019, had a sliding glass window was all, which really sort of made us real vulnerable. It made Rachel up front very vulnerable at times. We actually had a couple incidences early in 2020 with upset citizens that were using that, and it was something that was very concerning. So when we get to reopen, we actually have a brand new solid piece of thick safety security glass there and new countertops, and we were able to put money from our building fund to that to help us increase our safety and security. So that was a great thing to do. Part of the goal is to also traffic safety. Traffic safety is a big one. People, get hurt. And that's what we're trying to avoid in cars, pedestrians, everything else. So one thing we did this last year that we were not part of was part of the DUII funding grant. And we actually jumped on board on that, and we've been doing really well. Through all the lockdowns and everything else, actually our DUIs for last year, between 19 and 2020, there's only 3 DUI arrests difference in that year, even though people were probably not moving around as much. So having our enhancements sort of helps us get out there and find out what's going on and trying to stop those people from hurting themselves or anybody else. Another one I'm really proud of, actually, for our department is just everything we did through the pandemic. And the last one here, you see the Sandy Armstrong sticker sitting there on the slide. We were able to partner with the Chamber of Commerce, and it just was a great way to reach out and give back to the community. We helped with the Thanksgiving dinner that Covered Bridge puts on. We were able to present them with a nice plaque. For 15 years of doing that, that's a long time to be just reliable every Thanksgiving to be giving out meals to the community. And each and every year, that's been a tradition with the police department is to help the Covered Bridge put on that event. We're very happy to do that and actually recognize her for that. The other one was Postal Connections. We gave them an award just for being just great and saving some people some money through fraudulent activity. The people who were coming in and not realizing sometimes they were being duped by somebody in another country saying that they were going to get money back, you know, exchange type scams. Just great citizens doing some wonderful things in our community, and it was just wonderful that we were able to reach out to them and recognize them for that. So our challenges going forward. There are more programs I'd like to get going into the community and reach out, like a car unlock program for people that, you know, just lock their keys in the car accidentally and they're the Safeway and the little ones in the back and trying to get there and you know, help people out. That's something we'd like to do. Also a security camera sharing system. Where through the Ring program, anybody could throw any videos that they have for suspicious activities and stuff up on that platform, and we can look at it, as well as us showing videos from stores where people have shoplifted and we're trying to identify them and ask for the public's assistance. So that'll be something that'll be help. The Medical Alert Foundation and Take Me Home, those are programs for Alzheimer's, as well as different ways to help people that have medical issues and stuff. We can actually know who they are, where they go, what they look like, pictures, and have a database for them. So we can be very quickly, an officer can go out to a scene with somebody and have everything current with them so they can actually go look for somebody that's walked away from a home, a child and or adult. Again, increase our community presence, partnering and hosting community events. We're doing that now. We've got people asking for different permits and working with them and trying to come up with better solutions sometimes for the idea that they have, and just trying to help them move forward with it to get everybody back together as we can with the rules that are in place currently. Again, continuing the accreditation process, that is a process, I will tell you, and most of it falls on me. So I'm trying to cut away all the other duties, responsibilities that I have and try to do that too. So sometimes it's a little difficult to get to, but we will get there. One thing for law enforcement that we're seeing that affects decision making, just affects officers' well-being. I can tell you after 30 plus years doing this job, it can get heavy at times, is developing a resiliency program for our staff. I have a meeting in a couple weeks with CIS and my supervisors to look at a program that'll look at mental health, physical health, and just resiliency for our officers and how we're going to be able to deliver that to them, hopefully at a zero cost or very little cost to the city to be able to bring that up. Also, recognizing these type of things helps us with that last bullet you have down there, which is basically recruiting and retention. Law enforcement right now, it's a really tough time. You see it all the time in the news. People are leaving at extremely fast rates, and people aren't walking back in to take up those ranks. So we as a small agency need to do everything we can to show people that when they come to us or would like to work here, that we not only care about them, but their family, their health, and everything that we can given the budget that we have. So it's really important. The one above that, increasing professional capacity, we're doing that. I think I've shown that before with having Detective Butler going to Marion County. I have an officer currently that is wanting to become a drug recognition expert. We're connecting him with various people and trying to get a ride along in to look at that program, and hopefully in this next year get him signed up and get into that. And it's very specialized, but it's extremely needed. As many DUIs that we have, it would be good for this end of the county to have an expert run around when we can. And that is it. Questions?
Does anyone have questions for the chief? Okay. Thank you, Chief. I just want to say from me, excellent job with what you've been given this situation. You continue to impress me. Nice job. Looking forward to next year with you.
Yeah. Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
Good evening. I take it this slide means that I'm up.
You're up.
Even if there is no MC to announce me.
Go ahead, Dan Fleischman,
hold
from
on
Planning
and
and Development Department.
Let me get my screen over to, so that when I'm looking at it, I'm also looking at the camera.
There you go.
There we go. There we go. All right. Now I'm looking at you when I look at my screen instead of being in profile. For those of you who have not met me, I'm Dan Fleischman. I am the Planning and Development Director for the city. And I have the unique position compared to the others you'll be hearing from this evening and or tomorrow night that I am actually the entire department. The planning department, when I arrived back in 2006, so there was an assistant planner. There were several clerical people in the office that, not in the department, but in the public works department that helped out. But for the past 14, 15 months at least, we've even lost the clerical position. The strategic issues that the Planning and Development Department is working on, we continue to work on downtown revitalization. Prior, even just 4 or 5 years ago, as we were still coming out of the 2008-9 recession, there were a number of vacant spaces downtown. We have since seen a couple of buildings renovated. We see continuing renovation. There is relatively little vacant space downtown that the landlords or the building owners are interested in having occupied. There are a couple of spaces that have been vacant for decades, and the building owners are very happy that way for whatever reason. We continue to work on getting additional employment opportunities in the Wilco Road industrial area. You heard Susanna mention the work we're doing on the roundabout at the Wilco Shaft Golf Club Road intersection. The potential for needed improvements at that intersection has limited interest in private development of the vacant land in the industrial park area. And we're hopeful that the city getting that project designed and eventually financed will make that vacant land more attractive to development. There was also, and that is part of our economic development strategies. A year and a half ago, the city council adopted a set of economic development strategies for the city. And the other effort is looking at housing and residential zoning and what can the city do to provide additional flexibility in the design of residential developments, additional help promote more affordable housing for those who need it. For the past year and a half, the department and the Planning Commission have been working on a set of code amendments to bring the city's residential zoning more. It's really the first wholesale look at our residential zoning since that zoning was written in the mid-1970s when the city was about half the size that it is today. So we will be continuing to work on that in the coming fiscal year and hopefully see that go forward. Next slide, please. Just as a measure of activity in the department in 2019, and 2020, there were 8 land use applications filed. So far in 2021, There's been 5 land use applications filed. Most of these so far this year have been relatively small that can be handled by staff, but there have been some more major applications that have gone before the Planning Commission and also the City Council.
They're called
yes.
Jimmy's.
Well, maybe about constellations.
Constipation.
Hey, real quick, try to mute our mics if we're having conversations in the background.
Okay, finish writing this so that you can turn it in.
So I'll try to continue. Next slide, please.
Yes,
Personnel services make up the bulk of the Planning and Development Department's budget. It is myself, and last year budgeted for a code enforcement officer at approximately half-time. That position was not filled last year because of the limitations placed on us by COVID. But we have placed it in the budget again this year, and we shall see how the city's financial situation allows that position to be filled or not. In the meantime, I have been taking over the code enforcement responsibilities with appreciated assistance from both the police department and Public Works Department. There is some funding in the proposed budget for continued contract services to, again, to continue to fund implementation of economic development strategies. We hope to be hiring some consultants to work on some of the projects that document says we should be doing in these years. Next slide. Oh, and I guess that's my presentation. If any of the budget committee members have questions, I will do my best to answer them.
Thanks, Dan. Does anyone have questions for the city planner?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead, Brent.
What kind of industry development do you anticipate out on Wilco Road? For example, you have certain things out there now. Do you anticipate future development along those lines? Or what would be the ideal type of development out there on Wilco Road?
I guess those are really two different questions. What would be ideal and what is it I anticipate? I would anticipate smaller scale manufacturing than some of the bigger facilities that are out there. You know, I would be very surprised if we saw another facility, for instance, the size of Geldwen. But small machine shop or other fabrication and manufacturing would be likely. Tradesmen's warehouses, shops, perhaps transportation distribution type facility. I have had discussions with one of the manufacturing operations that are out there about the possibility of expansion. They need more space. Some of the vacant land also, there's been the discussion of possibility of a manufactured home dealership. So that wouldn't be manufacturing, that's more of a retail, but it's a, you know, that's not a use that would likely to go in a commercial zone or downtown because of the space needs. What would be ideal for this city is a manufacturing use that has a year-round water demand that's not seasonal. We now have, you know, with the loss of NORPAC, we've built the water infrastructure to handle their demand, but that demand was only there for 4, 5, 6 months a year. Something that ideal would be something that is capital intensive, but also provides for employment opportunities for residents of the city.
Great, thank you, Dan. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
And with that, we come back to the general fund and get to talk about the community center.
Thank you, Susanna. Go right ahead.
You're welcome. So in this fiscal year, because of COVID, all we have been able to utilize the community center for is the senior meals, and then when FEMA rented it to use the facility to help with the neighboring people from the fire that we had. What we're hoping will happen as COVID loosens up is that we'll have some revenue this coming fiscal year. So we did anticipate a small amount. We took what we received before the pandemic and cut it in half, hoping that at least half the year we'll get to see some rentals at this point for the community to utilize the community center besides the meals, senior meals. So that's kind of what we're looking at going forward. The next slide. So this is our budget for this year. We did do the capital project last year because the ACE-JAC system completely ended. And so we have a brand new one. We accomplished that this year with the 8,000 that we did. And then we're just estimating the 31,000 for expenditures this year for a combination of utilities and janitorial service for cleaning up and just some basics. So that's kind of where we're looking at for the community center. Any questions on that?
Yes, Susanna, this
Yes.
is Counselor Hook. It's kind of an overall question, but the community center and even the police lobby had me kind of wondering this. What are the metrics that we need to meet before we can open up the community center and like the police lobby and other buildings? Do you know kind of where those metrics are coming from and what we're waiting to hit for metrics so that we can open things up?
So that's driven by the governor. And Keith, are you there? Because he's the one monitoring that. Keith? Is he here there? Is he there? He's here somewhere, right? Did we lose him? There he comes. I can't hear you. Okay. He's having some technical difficulty. Give him a second.
Looks like Alyssa's going to come fix us again here.
Yep.
Thank you. Oh, heard you for just a second there, I think. Yes, we got you.
The speaker's acting up.
So it seems like every time we turn off the speaker on mute, we have to unplug it and plug it back in. So yeah, to answer the question, what we've been looking at is the metrics from the governor's office. We had been waiting to go into a moderate risk to open some of that up. With the community center, there would still be limitations on that. We are monitoring the situation currently from OHA and are working with staff to have conversations. So we've been ready to open back up. We're waiting for a time where we can do that safely and can do that with following the guidelines that are in place as required, since we are required to follow the OHA guidelines and the guidelines from the governor's office.
And what do the guidelines sort of say about like government buildings being open? Because I know like Department of Revenue right now is open to the public. So I'm just curious what the differences are for us versus them.
One of the big challenges we have is, for instance, in City Hall is the space that we have in terms of that front counter space and the spacing of employees. So that's been one of the big challenges that we've had. Same thing with the police department and trying to make sure with the community center, it's more just guidelines. We're following what other communities are doing as well and looking at safety measures to try to do that. So it really has been a challenging situation in the library. has a plan in place when we can return as well. But we're trying to find an opportunity to make sure that employees are safe, and that people that have visited are safe, and that we have the proper spacing that we need to do that. So really, one of the big limitations we have, as opposed to, for instance, Kaiser, is just the size of our facility and the entranceways to those to make sure that we can keep the proper safety distances required by the OHA guidelines.
Do we have an anticipated date that we can start having these discussions as like a council, or hear from you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at that information right now. I firmly believe that we're reaching a point where we're going to return to being able to open up more fully. We anticipated that was going to happen by this point. It hasn't happened yet, but we do anticipate that there is going to be, for lack of a better term, an opportunity to return to normal. I think what's driving that is we're reaching the point where everyone who wants to have received a vaccine can receive a vaccine. That's both the public and the employees. And so we're at a point where it's just time, like many other states are doing, for us to return to normal. So we anticipate that is coming sooner rather than later, but we're still waiting for official word on some of those guidelines coming down from the governor's office.
Thank you, Keith. And I just wanted to be clear that it has sounded like this entire time in conversations I've had with you and that we've had at council, that the goal has been to open up as soon as we safely can. And that sounds like you're continuing to trend in that direction as quickly as feasible.
Yes, and I think people, we are working hard to try to do that, and I really do anticipate that very shortly that'll occur. I know California, we've been monitoring other states. They're looking at a June 15th reopening for the state. I'm anticipating the governor would, I don't have any insider information, I don't have any backdoor communication, but I would anticipate that something similar will be happening in Oregon shortly. But if we can move faster than that, I'm happy to move faster than that too.
Thank you, Keith.
Thanks.
Okay, if there's no other questions on that, Susanna, you want to continue?
Yeah, if I can get my mouse to cooperate to let my camera come back.
Oh, good luck. Thank you.
Any other questions on the community center? Okay, so the next slide, we're going to talk about the court. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So this pandemic has definitely been a struggle for our courts because of how it's been closed and the people comfortable coming when the times we were open. So revenue has definitely been down this fiscal year for it. We did do a small increase for next year because about 10,000, just under 10,000, because we're just, again, not sure how safe people are going to be wanting to come if they have a court scheduled date and how many we can have each time. So those limitations are still moving forward. So we're anticipating that to be lower. We do have to fill the 0.8 court clerk position in this fiscal year, so we can get that person started. Next slide. And overall, there's no real big change to the budget itself for materials and services. The only change really is our assessment of this, my assessment and my team's assessment after spending a lot of time with the courts, is it really is a 0.8 position, not a 0.5. That's really our only change, to have that position filled. And that's really all that's happening in the court budget. Any questions on any of that? Okay, next slide is a governing body. So on this one, you can go ahead and go to the next one slide. So on this one, we continue to keep the budget, having training available for the council members so they can continue that growth each year. We have, due to the pandemic and this constraints, have put the community improvement grant on hold for this fiscal year, giving us time at this point to move forward with the other constraints that we're dealing with and ensure essential services is done. And so at this point, this fiscal year, we did leave that out. Other than that, there's no real changes. What's the next slide? Does it show the budget? Yep. So as you can see, there's no changes really in this one either. Our memberships that they are important for our council members is still the same, and the training opportunities, and just holding back on the community grant. Any question on the governing bodies budget? Okay, next slide, the administration budget. You go ahead and go to the next one. So there's no real change in here. We have the staffing is still the same. We're just going to fill the vacant position. The capital project is for the generator, and part of that with the electrical pole for the emergency management part of what we're doing there. Other than that, there's no real changes in our administration budget. It's the same moving forward. Any questions on this budget? Okay, our non-departmental, now in our non-departmental, we originally had emergency management, but then after me reading rules and double checking, realized it really belongs in administration. So that was moved, just so you all know that. And it's inside of administration going forward where it should have been. I'm still that big book I just showed you about the gap rules, so I'm still catching up. I wish I could say that book was memorized, but it's really not. As I continue to dig through. But thank you for our wonderful auditors, because they continue to help guide me along the way when I get stuck. So we did, as Dan talked about, we did get approved for the new HUD grant of $500,000. That one is in there and belongs in there because it's not tied to anything. Just as we finished up the CDBG grant from last year, it stayed there until it was tracking. And the other real thing that we put in the non-departmental is the transfers. Now, this budget will be approved with the anticipation, because we have to budget at worst case scenario, like we talked about. So that right now you're going to approve it with zero money and lower money zero money to the pool and lower money getting transferred to the park and the library, and all that will change. Of course, when we bring the new budget forward, and that could even reduce more from the need and support from the general fund, which could actually help the general fund as well. So just know what you're approving now is really going to change quickly. Okay. Any questions on the non-departmental part of the general fund? Okay.
I have a question, Susanna.
Okay.
So with all these moving parts and things changing, so the budget committee, we approved the budget as it is now, then what happens when things do change?
Well, we're already actively working on rewriting the budget for all the funds involved by the levy change. And we will pretty much on the heels of approving this budget, we'll be bringing you back the supplemental budget and what we're doing. As of July 1st, once this is approved, we have enough money for our spending authority to move forward in what we're doing on projects. But we still have to come in and improve, because there's going to be big changes with the expenditures and stuff like that. So we will be actively doing stuff. We just have to get the numbers too. Does that make sense? So hopefully we're going to see it, because we have to do the same time frames as we do this one. You have to public notice, it has to wait the time frame. Budget committee has to meet. You have to wait the time frame for the community before it goes to committee. So we're hoping to start all of that pretty much right in July and moving forward to get it approved.
Okay, so that was my question, is it the budget committee reconvenes, or is it the city council, or how does that work?
Budget committee has to come back together to see it first, because a supplemental budget, it's too large of a change. So we have to do all the steps we're doing right now. We have to do it all over again.
Okay, thank you for that.
I'm sorry, budget committee. We get to see you a lot this year.
Well, it's good to know and how the process works, and as a reminder for everyone as well. So thank you.
Yes, because usually if there's a budget change that's under the 10% for expenditures or 15% for contingencies, it just needs to go to council, because we're moving line items. But we're talking way more than 15% or 10% for expenditure change, and will more than likely be more than a 15% change order contingencies that has to go through all of the exact same steps that we're doing right now. And our focus is going to be library, parks, pool, and the general fund, because the general fund supports transfers to these other funds.
I have a question, Susanna.
So
we were talking about how the city has cut positions, like I think it was 6.9 positions we've cut this last year because of COVID and the uncertainty. But is that going to, a lot of them were from the pool. Is that going to delay opening because we don't have staff for the pool also?
Well, we're going to be putting up, hopefully by the end of this week, the supervisor position that we want to fill, so we can move forward with that. That's what kind of I mentioned, how I have we'll have approval for spending authority to start that process, so we can get that supervisor hired, because we're not going to do a full manager. We're going to be restructuring the staffing, because one of the advantages that we found that helped us during this horrible time is how much the staffing dropped so low in the pool. We're able to do a lot of repairs, and I've brought those to you along the way of what we've done. So as we work to build this budget, we're going to need a pool supervisor for sure. So we need to get that person hired right away. And then we do have to fly the position for 2 weeks before we can close it. That's why we're starting it now. And then once we get that person in, then we'll start hiring the aquatic instructors and the lifeguards. And then that way the supervisor is a part of that interviewing process to get them up and running now. And I'm going to be talking about the pool here in just a second, but we're also, got the HVAC system approved. We've got that all signed as of Friday. It's a 6-week process where we're going to get the materials. So that'll be getting fixed the first part of July. And so we're kind of hoping the timing works out, that we'll get staffing hired now, and we're moving in that direction while we finish up the repairs that need to be done before we could open, that we were waiting to see what the levy was going to do. So that way by July, we get all of that in and get it approved, that we're looking at August that we can open, because we'll be ready to go. That's kind of our target goal at this point.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on this part? Okay. Any other questions we thought of for the general fund or any of that? What do you think? Okay. What's next? Streetlights. Okay, so next slide. So streetlights expenditures are going to be lower, a little over 10,000 this year is what I'm estimating, and that's a combination of evacuations, power outages. We've just had some really big national events that caused it to be decreased this fiscal year. But we do know that the lights are on, and that we hope to not have any more power outages or evacuations or any massive changes. So this year's budget has brought it back up to what an average it is. So the next slide should be showing you, oops, no, I guess I didn't put it in there. Oh, because it's a one-line budget. So this year we budgeted the 114, which is usually about what it averages to. And of course, we do know that the disclaimer in there about the council, there is that code that we still have that option to do more with, that's still there in our code. So any questions on streetlight? Okay, next slide. Other requirements. So in our policies, when we take a look at the grand total of our operating costs, we must have at least 10% in our contingencies. With our expenditures this year, the 855,000 in our contingency fund does keep us in policy. So we're in compliance with our policies. Again, as a reminder, contingency means we could possibly need to spend this money this year. We're not sure what we might need, but we know we might. And so this money is prepared for that. And if something comes up, like we just did a few weeks back, or maybe a month now, because I was out for a little bit, we did a budget change because we had to move money from contingencies up to materials and services for parks because of the increased cost. So if there is a need that we need to spend it for, we would be coming back to council explaining what that needs to be done and where that money and which line item that would be moving up to. So that's what that contingency is for. So we have that safety net if something comes up. And the the stuff here for the 765,000, we left that number the exact same as last year. That really is something catastrophic happens and we need a huge approval to touch that. So that's just kind of, we try to protect that and let that sit there. Any questions on these two for the other requirements?
Yes, Susanna, this is Counselor Hook again. When you're talking about increased park costs, are you talking about the debris cleanup that we had to do, or what was that? Okay.
Yes. So that 5,800 that we brought out of contingency up into materials and service was to help do a lot for that. And then we since we didn't fill the seasonal position, we're able to move some of the salaries that weren't going to use down into materials and service to help cover those costs to get that debris cleaned up. And that's kind of what contingency does for us. It gives us that safety net. And we did the same thing. We moved contingent out of the general fund, or we moved money around when the HVAC system went out that we didn't prepare for the community center. So you never know when something's going to happen, as we've all learned really well from this fiscal year. Always a surprise. Does that make sense?
Surprises, yeah.
Any other questions on this part?
I have a real quick question. This is Connie Dominguez, citizen member. As far as the contingency budget goes, when do you have to get approval to use that for everything that's moved from there, or a certain dollar amount?
Anything. Even if I moved $10 from that fund, I have to take that to council. Because in the apportionment letter that we approve, you see that it's titled by each topic. So anytime we move within those lines, we have to let them know what we're doing.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right, then we will give it to Jenna. Thank you, guys.
Evening, everybody. The Stayton Public Library fulfills a vital role in our community by keeping people connected, whether virtually or in person. We build relationships and advocate for lifelong learning while remaining visible and approachable regardless of the venue. Let's start with highlights. Providing library services this year has required an incredible amount of innovation and creativity by your library staff. So this year we designed and implemented a curbside service program with online and phone support. We provided monthly take and make kits for children, teens, and adults, and delivered them through a drive-through event once a month. Those kits are a great opportunity to provide to offer multi-generational activities for families to do together. Oh, so you want to go ahead and go? We provided live story time through Zoom and developed an accompanying online option and a paper version for families to explore at their own pace. We created a storyline to provide an additional option for families to call in and hear a library staff member read a story, so they can call in on the phone anytime.
Yeah.
We provided outreach. We provided outreach story time to Stayton Elementary kindergarten classrooms through Zoom, and also.
Real quick, Jenna, can we have everybody mute their mics if they're not speaking real quick to the committee meeting? Thank you, guys.
We provided outreach story time to Stayton Elementary kindergarten classrooms through Zoom, and also the same unplugged options as our other story times. Go ahead and go. We expanded our wireless access by extending library Wi-Fi throughout the parking lot with the help from SCTC. And we also started circulating mobile Wi-Fi hotspots made possible through funding from the Institute of Museum and Library Services, and in cooperation with Chemeketa Community College and Chemeketa Cooperative Regional Library Service, CCRLS. We also continued our participation in CCRLS, which allows us to enhance the library's ability to meet community needs. That relationship was especially helpful this year as we had budget constraints due to the levy. So that's a great partnership for us. I was trying to figure out something to write on the changes that didn't change for the library. So everything for the library has changed this year. So all library services and programs were successfully altered or adjusted to online or social distance options in order to maintain services to the public during this time. We enhanced our virtual options with live story time through Zoom. We hosted an online presenter. We provided early literacy resources and craft videos on our YouTube channel, and so much more. When we also worked on developing non-technology options, we did story walks in the park. We did a mummy shuffle in the park during Halloween. We created the storyline. We did scavenger hunts in downtown businesses to encourage downtown traffic. We did curbside user advisory and take and make kits as well. Another thing that was done this year is that we were able to increase the library's collection of downloadable audio and ebooks to provide additional access to library materials. And we also partnered with the Stayton Library Foundation to provide giveaway books to children at school district meal sites. We're one of the ones that we'll get to see you in a little while because our budget in this proposal has no levy funding. So we'll see you for a supplemental, but right now it includes a transfer from the general fund of 130,000 and 100,900 in CCRLS reimbursement. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Jana, I have a question. This is Counselor Hook. I've meant to ask this before, but can you kind of explain what it looks like for someone to check out a mobile Wi-Fi hotspot? Like, what does that look like for them? How do they use it?
Yeah, they just need to give us a call, or they need to give us a call, but it checks out just like a book. So it checks out to them for 90 days. It's a little black box that looks kind of like this. They check it out, it comes in a little bag, and it provides a mobile hotspot for them. We checked one out to a student the other day. So it's been, right now I would tell you, Paige, all of mine are checked out, but they'll be back and we can put holds on them and stuff too, and work with other entities to get them. But they were a real nice addition for us and a real good option for serving the community.
Thank you. I've never seen one before, but I appreciate you holding it up and showing that it's actually like an actual tangible item. Thank you.
Yeah, it just, I'd be happy to answer your question for the library that you asked about opening, Page, if you wanted. For the library, we really need to hit moderate status for the governor. The restrictions for us at high are so much lower than what I can do curbside. And for us, we really had to evaluate how we can best serve our community, and what I can do curbside in this moment and high risk is so much greater than what I can do and with a limited opening. So we're prepared to open and excited, and actually thought we were going to get there a little earlier. But I think for us, we just have to really make sure we're serving the most amount of people that we can. And unfortunately, high risk doesn't really allow us to do that. So that's what we're waiting for, Paige.
And that's because of the capacity limits within the building, correct? Okay.
Correct. Yeah, because even at moderate risk, we'll still have a capacity limit and ask people to limit their visits. But the capacity limit for high would be much less than what I can do for the public right now, curbside. So.
Yeah, it's incredible that you guys have outserved basically Salem Public Library during COVID too, with checking out resources to our community members. That's pretty impressive. And we were really close to moderate before April 30th.
Yeah,
so.
No, we were really sure. I was like super ready, and then I'm like, we hopefully soon, right?
Thank you, Jenna. Does anybody have questions real quick before she leaves us? Or maybe she already went, not sure here.
Sorry.
Oh, thanks, Jenna. Okay, sounds like you're good. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm back.
Hello, Susanna.
Hello again. It is time for the pool. So kind of said this already quite a few times. This is the budget that you're looking at was really without the levy, and it was really keeping it in a frozen status as we moved into permanent enclosure. So now that we get to open, we have a whole different ball game to do. So it's taken Oregon Trust a very, very long time to get back to us, but really happy that they got back to us like a couple of days before the levy actually was going to the voters. So we were had it in our hands, ink pen in our hand, ready to sign, just waiting to see what happened on Tuesday night. So they got everything signed, got everything approved. Best Seating Air is working forward on getting everything ordered, and so that we can get that done with their share. We're moving forward on what we can do to do the roof, and so we hopefully can do that. The other small repairs, like the 12 lights that I said were out, those are getting done now because we have to bring in a lift. They're up in the ceiling. We're going through looking at some issues in the shower. We're dealing with some other things so that we can have everything ready to go. We've already done the trip hazards and other things and cleaned up other areas so that we're ready to open. Mike and I will be meeting again. He sent me his list, so I'm going to go against budget and see what we can do to complete now as we're moving forward, and then going into the new budget that we'll be bringing to you. As we talked about, we're anticipating it to be open in August because we'll have the new HVAC system, and as well as the new system that will make air quality better in there, and we should even see less condensation on the windows, which is super exciting. Because of the upgrades that they're doing, will be really nice. So then we can actually see out the windows, you know, when there's a lot of people in there, which would be super cool. We also need to deal with the doors, so I'll be looking at that because we have some lock issues with those with the big doors, and because the water eats them. So we'll be moving forward with that. So the next slide is the budget, but there, like I said, it's not going to really. It had the beginning fund balance of what we had to work with. It has only the 0.25 staff person managing just the equipment and keeping the chlorine. So all of this will totally change, and it won't even look like this when we come back. So is there any questions about the pool at this point?
Yeah, Susanna, is there a number on that Oregon Community Trust approval?
The overall bill is just under 100,000. It was like 96,000, 92, somewhere right in there. And they're going to come in with about 28,000, but they're going to cover on that. So a little over 60,000 is going to be our share. And they decided that we didn't need to buy a whole new system because we've done such an amazing job at piece repairing and replacing pieces along the way as we've been protecting this HVAC system. So their suggestion was to just finish rebuilding all the pieces that weren't rebuilt, and then do the other changes that would add the air quality movement, which was some extra additional pieces added in. So that's how the breakdown of the details for the bid.
So that initial $300,000 to $500,000 number wasn't going to be necessary.
Nope.
Okay.
We're very happy about that. They had a huge team of people out there to make this decision, though. It was a huge conversation, and it took like weeks.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
So real quick, Susanna, is there anticipation that it could be sooner than August? I mean, that's pretty far throughout the summer, and we just had this, resounding show of community support for this resource. I guess I would just implore you as staff to make that as expeditiously as possible. So
it is our top priority. We are under the constraints of having that system replaced before we can open those doors. For air quality and movement is critical. I have had community members call, and they were just so, yeah, I don't care, that's fine. I said, it could be August, it could be September at the worst case scenario. We're okay with that. We're just happy to hear that it's opening. So I haven't got any real negative responses as the community is calling and asking for when it's opening, because they know we have steps involved to get there. But it is our top priority, and Keith and I and Alyssa met this morning and started putting the timeline together so we can move quickly.
Glad to hear that. Thank you.
Susanna, this is Counselor Hook.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering two things. As you guys figure out that potential timeline, is there a way that we could have some type of like an infographic for the community to share so they can kind of see what milestones we have to meet to open the pool? Because it seems like there's a lot of moving pieces in opening it, like with what has to be done with different maintenance stuff. And then also when you guys are looking for a supervisor for the pool, I'm hoping that, and this is from a lot of feedback from community members, that we have a focus on making sure that also the children's swimming lessons get put back like on the schedule, because I know we had our aquatic classes for a little bit open, but not the kids swimming lessons. And so just making sure that even if it has to look a little bit different, we have to think outside of the box and have parents get involved or something for social distancing. Just making sure that whoever that is willing to put that extra effort to make sure that we're restoring all of the services to the community.
We're hoping to see some real changes on what our restrictions will be by August. So as I said, Keith monitors that and keeps us up. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that will be. I know the big picture plan is to put everything back in and then have a day for free swim, basically for families to just come and enjoy it. But still making sure the instructions are there for the swimming lessons, for the seniors, and for the swim team. We want all those things back. So that is our goal.
Susanna. Oh,
you're welcome. Yes.
Susanna, this is Counselor Ort. Can you say that number again? What is for the HVAC system? What is our portion that we're going to be paying? I know you've said it, but I keep missing it.
The whole cost is right around, not just under 100,000. It was like 96,000, 98,000 was right in there.
Okay.
And Oregon is community trust is going to pay about 28,000 of that total, and the balance is left for us.
Okay.
Oh, 70.
I guess I should have pulled that up and had it right in front of me, huh? That would have been good.
Did we ever figure out if the pool was leaking?
Yes, it is losing about 10,000 gallons a month.
Okay. Do we have any ideas of what we're going to do with that?
Not at this point, because we wanted to get the other priorities done first so that we could open the doors, and then we can start looking at how we're going to move forward. One of the nice things is a lot of our maintenance lists, we were able to whittle it down so that as we put the maintenance plan together going forward, when we're looking at what our rates really need to be versus hours open and staffing. Because that one is going to be, we also have an issue with the slide pump. It doesn't work anymore. So we're going to need to be looking at that, but we can get the pool open without worrying about the slide. Because we have a feeling that the leak is actually in the concrete underneath, because this pool was built with all of the pipes encased in concrete. We have a real obstacle at this point. So while the pool was closed, it was really good for Mike to finally come up with a number of what we're actually losing because of the leak somewhere within the concrete for the piping.
Hey, Susanna, can I jump in here on that really quick?
Yes.
So just to let everybody know, Mike Brash has been taking over the pool, and what we've been looking at is he's been doing a lot of just great daily work and making sure, and what we can do right now is we have a time where we could figure out exactly what the actual leakage of the pool was. So he's been collecting data throughout this entire time, and that's why we know that. I have had a conversation with Lance to look about trying to TV our current pipes that are encased in concrete to see if we can see where those leaks are, because the amount of leaks that we're having that we know this at this point is related to nothing more than the system, the pool system, if you will. We know this isn't coming from people splashing or carrying water out, or all. This is actually just pure water loss. We also know that because of the groundwater levels at the pool, that impacts it as well. So we know we're getting I&I infiltration and inflow in and out of the pool as well. That's just a condition of our ground, and that's also just a condition of the location of the pool. So Lance has had that conversation. We're looking about trying to take some time to see if we can't get a TV down there, basically a television to scope those lines and see if we can't figure out exactly where the issue is. So how successful we'll be at this point, I don't know, but we have had conversations on how we try to address that, and to see if there's a repair we can do without having to basically tear up the structure of the pool. So that's where we're at right now. Lance, if you feel like I misrepresented or all that, feel free to hop on, but that's the conversation we had, trying to use some technology we use in other areas to get more information on that pool. But the data collection has been really important to let us know where things stand.
Thanks. If I could just, just real quick, to Susanna, what you're saying, when there were concerns about the levee and the pool closing when it first closed, a lot of community members, even outside that were not residents that use the pool, that were concerned about it. They were very interested in raising funds and really just helping out the pool. So I would hope that we can continue to kind of reach out to them and, use that momentum to say, okay, the residents of Salem, or excuse me, of Stayton, passed the levy. Now, if you could help us out with all these other things and, keep us going, that would be great. So I would love to see some outreach with that, with our different organizations moving forward.
Cool. Keith would need to address if that's going to come more from us or if the pool foundation already had plans going forward. Because I know in a lot of our levy meetings, the pool foundation person talked about fundraisers and things like that. So I don't really know what our plans with that going forward. So Keith, do you have anything to
It was
add?
more of a just a comment to the community, all of you out there watching, and then also just to keep for the city to keep in mind that there are people that want to help. So, you know, just sometimes you just have to ask, type of thing.
Okay. Okay. Great. I'm sure I'll be giving lots of pool updates to council as we move forward with our timeline and opening and all of those great things. Any other questions for me before we switch to Lance? Okay, then
This is a big surprise. I think we've only made it to Public Works on the first night once in 6 years. So this is a big surprise. I'm glad I came in from my gym from working out so I could be here.
We are too.
That's with extra teaching slides, because each time I try to have another subject to teach. So that's pretty good, Lance.
With that being
All
said,
yours.
I'm happy to be here tonight, Mr. Mayor and members of the Council and Budget Committee, to present the Public Works budget for this year. I will say this last year has been trying, not just for everybody in this world, but Public Works people in particular. Last year at this time, I came before you with a number of projects that we were really looking forward to, and due to the pandemic and the funding and the reduced taxes and us looking at the budgets throughout the year, some of those projects just weren't done. So as we go through this tonight, I would like you to be aware of that we did hold back money from projects just to make sure that we had funding to keep going on throughout the year, not knowing what our revenues would be. With that being said, next slide, please. Our park staffing will be the same this year. We don't propose any new employees. Next. Accomplishments. As you know, last year or the year before last, we submitted an application, actually it was last April, to the OPRD for a large grant. We were actually selected to go to the finals, and there was one of 20 of us, one of 20 cities, city projects, and Stayton was one of them, to present our application to the OPRD board. Unfortunately, we were not selected. They did give me very good feedback, so the next time we go forward, we'll have that feedback and we'll try to build off that momentum. We continue to mow and clear brush at Riverfront Park to try to use that, make that more usable. Unfortunately, this last February's ice storms really put a damper on that. The community garden last year was a very much of a success. And we used Mill Creek Park as a staging area for the residents to take their ice storm debris. This last February, March, I think we just closed it down here a few weeks back. And we're going to use those chips. They're all chipped up now. We're going to use those chips to create a park, a cross-country trail around Mill Creek Park. I just had a 30-inch pipe put in. And so what we're going to try to do is work with the middle school to continue their cross-country course through Mill Creek Park and around. I have one of my Parks Board members who's going to work with the Stayton Roadrunners and Regis and Stayton High School to try to get that accomplished. It'll be a community effort, but with that, that's what we're trying to use those chips for. Next. Strategic plan, short term, provide professional maintenance to the parks, look for more grant opportunities for Mill Creek Park, update the parks website. We, one of my Parks Board members now, her husband actually has a drone, and we're going to try to have her talk to him about using his drone to create some nice video clips of our parks, and we're going to put those on our website so people can look at and see if it's a park that they want to go to. And this year we're going to be repairing asphalt pathways in a few of our parks to make sure that they're ADA compliant. Long-term, we're just going to continue to try to meet the needs of the city and the conservation plan, Riverfront Park, expand our city trails and our trails plan. That's a biggie for the current Parks Board, and continue to look for funding opportunities for Mill Creek Park. Next. Challenges, opportunities, providing enough staffing and labor for our desired service levels. I'm sure you've all been here long enough to know that we really have one person for all our parks and our maintenance. He's kind of taxed, and I imagine Bob will probably be retiring here. By the end of this presentation, he'll be tired and want to retire, but in the next few years, I'm sure. So it's kind of taxing having one person doing all this work. And long-term procuring land easements for trail system, things like that. Next.
Real quick, Lance.
Yes, sir.
Councilor David Patty. Hey, so what's the anticipation of clearing the debris that's out on the trail back behind Pioneer Park area there? I noticed it's fenced off and everything. I was just wondering, is there an estimated time to clear that path for folks?
I believe what you're referring to is Wilderness Park. The city does not own that. That is owned by the Santiam Water Control District. They are the ones that fenced it off. We had a 25-year lease with them, and they broke that lease. They gave us written notice that they wanted to cancel the lease. And at that time, they fenced it, and they didn't want anybody else, especially as of last fire season. So we don't maintain it.
Yeah,
we just don't.
Has there been any engagement to discuss possible, I don't know, volunteerism efforts or something in that vein?
I will defer to Mr. Campbell on that. I don't get into those direct negotiations with the Santiam Water Control.
Got you. Maybe we can touch bases on that another time, and then you can continue your presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Activity measures, as you can see here, we've got 203 acres of neighborhood parks. We generally have one person maintaining those. Although we do have a contract in the spring through fall for mowing most of our usable parks, and they're doing a great job, I might add. And you can see we continue to make sure our parks are usable for our citizens. The big thing there, vandalism repairs. We've had a pretty much of a spike this year, and I'm sure that has everything to do with COVID. More kids being home, restless, that kind of thing. But we've had a dramatic increase over the last 2 years. Next. Again, this budget was written with no levy funding. We'll be coming back with a new fund for you supplemental budget. Next. Park infrastructure. Again, this was written before the levy, but generally I always put $20,000 in there for any kind of equipment that breaks down, that type of thing. More hog fuel for around the equipment area so kids can fall and not get hurt. Next. Street fund. Next. We have the same amount of people proposed this year. Actually, Public Works operations has been down since our dear friend and Public Works Supervisor Tom Metzel retired in March. We've been down. So before that, we were down also in the water. So we've had 3 people basically running the Public Works operations side since March.
Lance, could I pause you right there? Did somebody have a question real quick?
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Yeah, thanks, Chair
Go ahead,
Patty.
Councilor Hook.
Yeah, Councilor Hook here. I wanted to hear again, like how big Riverfront Park is. That's the one that's across the Santiam River. There's a bridge.
Yeah, that's
Riverfront
about
is a
51
city
acres.
park, right?
That's about 51 acres, Councilor.
I feel like that's
Riverfront
sometimes a little nugget that we forget that we even have, that Riverfront Park there. But yeah, 51 acres, you said?
Yeah, it's roughly 51 acres. That's correct.
That's incredible. Incredible. Thank you. I couldn't remember exactly how big it was, but I remembered it was really big.
That's a beautiful park. Beautiful.
And that one is open, unlike the Wilderness Park, which the Santiam Water Control District owns, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So it is another alternative to the Wilderness Park, we have our own riverfront park that's 51 acres that we can explore.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Great, thanks. Sorry to interrupt your
No,
other
quite
part.
all right. Next. This last year, even though we did have the pandemic, our street program went on. We crafted agreements with Marion County Public Works, and we performed a slurry seal out in Pioneer Meadows and Jefferson Plate subdivision. Councilor Patty, we were in front of his house. He was well aware of those. And we paved the streets down in the industrial area, Rowe, Willamette, Deschutes Avenue. We saved about 31% by having an agreement with Marion County. And we started the design of the roundabout at Shaft Road and Golf Club Road. We are close to 30% plans with that. Next. As you can see, we continue to try to increase our workload and our activities throughout the year. Enough said. We have one person doing this, and it looks like he continues to do a great job. Next. This next year, our short term, I want to evaluate all the pavement street segments using the PCI pavement condition index, and I'll be purchasing Street Saver. These are one of those things that I wanted to do last year, just got caught up and did not get it done. We are going to get it done this year. And we're going to finish the roundabout design somewhere around November and start looking for funding sources to get that done. Hopefully we can get some, as I informed you guys last year, the reason I wanted to do this is to look for federal dollars. And I think this might play out with some federal dollars with the infrastructure bill that may pass. Long-term, upgrade the streets to a 65 of the PCI rating and continue to look for partnerships with Marion County and other agencies and perform other street reconstruction projects. Challenges, continue working with code enforcement and property owners to replace sidewalks in disrepair. These are things that we can all contribute with. We don't have to look for major project funding for that. It's individual property owners going out and putting a panel in here and there, a couple $100, $250 here and there to replace a panel. These are something that we can work together on and get these things done, make our streets and sidewalks more usable. Matching street projects with other utility improvements, we are always looking for that. And long-term partnerships with agencies to obtain resources to improve our streets, sidewalks, and bike travelways. We are actually working with Marion County, as far as the bike travelway. Marion County, we actually joined in with their applications for a safe streets for safe streets to schools fund grant last year. They actually received that grant. So we are in the process of designing a sidewalk on the south side of Shaft Road from Kendall Way up to the middle school. And we're going to be putting a beacon there, an actuated beacon in there for students. So it'll be safe for them to walk along the south side of Shaft Road and actually cross there with a lighted beacon to notify drivers of pending crossing. So that's a great thing. That should be taking place within the next year.
Hey, Lance.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Counselor Hook. I had a community member asking about how they can work with the city to try and get one of those types of crosswalks with a beacon, I think somewhere out on First Avenue. Does that grant also could it help out with something like that if the community member came to the council and talked about that need?
First Avenue, if you were talking about First Avenue, we have explored that. That is a Marion County road. And I believe it was last year or the year before that we applied for this same grant or one very much like it. And that was one of the areas there to put one of those beacons in a crosswalk in near Safeway. It was by the feed store there. And we did not get one there. And we were also looking one down at Washington Street near the elementary school. And we did not get that either. So we continue to look for ways to do that. Those both were county roads. And so we generally have more luck if we partner with the county on projects like that. But we do continue to look for those. As far as the First Avenue, if she wants to come to city council, that'd be great. We can always get a memorandum from the city council stating they in support of this project. But again, that is a county road, and we would have to apply for that grant.
Okay,
I mean, we can
thank
pay
you.
for it ourselves out of street funds, but that's another issue in itself, using state and taxpayer dollars for county road improvements.
Right, yeah. I was just thinking, because you said you were working with the county, that I wasn't sure if there was a way that we could squeak in some of that stuff, but it sounds like you're continuing to look for opportunities for that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Thank
the
you.
county recognizes that area on First Avenue as well as Washington's, as well as we do. And so they know there's a need for that there. And the next time we have a situation presented to us that we have available dollars where we can go after, we will look at that again.
Would it be helpful for residents to write their county commissioners as well, especially one of them that lives right here in Stayton?
Well, I'm a public works director. I don't know what the county commissioners will say about that. So I'd rather refrain from telling you, yeah, just go ahead and write your county commit. I'm going to refrain from that. I'll let the city manager speak to that.
Thanks,
That's what I'll say.
Thanks.
All right. Next.
I'm
sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. In a recent meeting with county commissioners, they told us that ODOT was generally kind of reluctant to put those flashing crosswalk beacons on well-traveled highways because they give pedestrians a kind of false sense of security. And that was just their quick thought on a question about crosswalks on First Avenue. So I don't know where we go from there. Keep insisting on it, possibly.
I'll jump in, Mr. Mayor. You're absolutely right, and the chief is here as well. I mean, generally speaking, the public tends to like those flashing beacon lights, but there is a lot of feeling amongst traffic experts and safety experts that they give a false sense of security, and that people press a button and think the flashing lights making them secure when they're not. So there can be resistance to those kind of programs just for that reason. So the mayor heard the county say that, and that's kind of what we're hearing as well. And that's actually kind of a general best practices that there is a movement away from those just for that reason.
Hey, Keith.
Yeah.
This is Counselor Hook. I am wondering, are they coming up with other solutions? Because I mean, doing nothing doesn't seem like it's a good approach either. I get the false sense of security, and that does make sense. But I know as a driver, they're eye-catching, and I've noticed many times, and this is just my perception, it's not data-driven, but I see a lot of people not stopping because in those areas that there aren't those flashing beacons, whereas where there are, people tend to stop more.
I just went to a traffic seminar hosted by a PhD that sits on the National Transportation Board. It really depends on the area that you're going to place it. That's what it is. It's a situational deterrent, and it really depends on where your design is at. Like he said, there may be areas that you do not want it because of that, but there are areas that are going to work great. For instance, we're going to be having one right in front of the middle school, and we put that before the state, and the state liked that idea. So those are areas that you look at as a project, and that's how they determine whether or not they would, if they're going to work or not.
Thank you.
Next. I think, maybe not. Yeah, all right, we're good. capital outlay for the street reconstruction and overlays. We budgeted $250,000 that probably will not take place until spring of 22. We want to get our roads evaluated using a new the new index, and we want to input it into Street Saver software to help us generate a better picture of where we should be putting those dollars. So until further notice, that's the plan. And I think you're really going to see a dramatic improvement when I can come before you and I give you my streets presentation. We'll be using Street Saver software. So you'll see graphs and all sorts of, wonderful charts and data that I can present to you to show you why we should be doing a certain street and why we shouldn't be doing other streets. It's going to be a great tool for myself and the Public Works Department, as well as it'll present wonderful exhibits for the City Council and our citizens to see why we're doing what we're doing with their tax dollars. Next slide, water fund.
Hey, Lance.
Yes, sir.
Real quick here for the rest of the committee, we're about 48 more slides to go here. It's 8:05 p.m. I suggest that we go ahead and pick this back up tomorrow at 6 p.m. Does anybody have any kind of expressed opposition to that idea? Okay. City staff, you guys have any input on that?
That
great.
Sounds okay.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that sounds okay. This is Alyssa. Go.
Okay.
Go on.
Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and adjourn tonight at 8:06 p.m. and then we'll pick back up tomorrow at 6 p.m. and we'll see you all then. So thank you all so much.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.